Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're going to be looking at how the idea of sustainability is evolving, especially in the world of projects. We'll be using two excerpts from the GPM Practical Guide. It's a guide to sustainable project management. And what I really want to understand is how sustainability is going beyond just like do no harm, and it's actually about regenerating the planet and society. So we've got some fascinating insights to unpack, so let's dive right in.
Yeah. So, what's really interesting is that we're seeing a move beyond the traditional triple bottom line, like balancing people, planet, and profit. We're actually moving towards what they call a quadruple bottom line.
Oh, okay.
Which adds in purpose.
That's a new twist.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like sustainability as a defensive strategy anymore. There's this push to make projects actually contribute to a larger purpose.
Right, exactly.
Beyond just avoiding negative impacts.
Yeah, and so it's not just about mitigating harm anymore. It's about actively restoring ecosystems, enhancing social equity and rebuilding degraded systems. So the guide actually uses the term regenerative sustainability to describe this approach.
I'm curious about this term regenerative sustainability. Can you give us some like concrete examples of what that might look like in a real project?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So imagine a construction project that not only minimizes waste, but also uses recycled materials. And it incorporates green infrastructure to enhance biodiversity. Or like a project that actively involves the local community in its planning and implementation.
Right.
To ensure social and economic benefits for everyone involved.
I see.
So those are just a few examples of how projects can move beyond simply mitigating harm and actually contribute to regenerating, the planet and society.
Okay, so it's not just checking boxes anymore. It's about creating like a truly positive impact.
Right.
But I'm wondering like what led to this shift towards regenerative sustainability? What were the driving forces behind this evolution in thinking?
Well, the guide actually points to a concept called societal pressure waves. And it's essentially public focus on sustainability has been rehabbing over time.
I see.
Pushing for, stronger action.
Right.
These waves actually started back in the 1970s with the recognition of environmental limits and the rise of the green movement.
The green movement. Okay. So it seems like these waves have been building momentum.
Yeah.
With each wave like demanding more from businesses and organizations.
Yeah, exactly.
So what came after the green movement?
So in the late 1990s and early 2000s, globalization really highlighted the need for global solutions to sustainability challenges. And then the urgency of climate action took center stage, leading to the rise of ESG, environmental, social, and governance factors in business decision-making.
Okay.
And so now we're seeing this surge in demand for regenerative practices as a direct outcome of, these escalating societal pressures.
So it sounds like the pressure is really on for projects to actually demonstrate real positive change, not just minimal impact.
Yeah.
And with so much money flowing into projects globally, that responsibility seems even greater. The guide mentions a staggering $15 trillion annually on construction projects alone.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sheer scale of projects makes them a critical lever for change. And that's where the Stockholm Resilience Center's Planetary Boundaries framework comes in. It helps us understand the impact of human activities on the Earth's systems.
Okay, so break that down for me a little bit. What are these planetary boundaries that we need to be aware of?
So essentially, there are 9 critical Earth processes that regulate the stability and resilience of the planet. Things like climate change, biodiversity loss, ocean acidification, freshwater use, and the framework defines safe operating spaces for each of these processes.
Okay.
And so if we exceed those boundaries, we risk irreversible environmental damage.
So it's kind of like a dashboard warning light for the planet. It's letting us know when we're approaching like dangerous thresholds.
Right, exactly.
I see. But how does this connect to project management specifically?
Well, that's the beauty of the GPM practice guide. It directly maps project activities to these planetary boundaries. It provides indicators to help project managers actually assess their impact on each boundary.
Okay.
So it gives them a concrete way to gauge whether their projects are contributing to a more resilient planet or pushing us closer to those critical thresholds.
Wow. That's a powerful tool. Yeah, it's not just about like these abstract ideas anymore. It's about measurable impact. It sounds like the role of a project manager is really evolving beyond, traditional concerns of time, budget, and scope.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sustainability is becoming a core competency for project managers.
Okay.
The guide emphasizes that it's not just about delivering a project on time and within budget, but also ensuring that it actually contributes to a sustainable future.
Yeah, that's a big ask. it must require like a fundamental shift in thinking for a lot of project managers.
Right.
So what does this new approach to project management actually look like?
Well, the guide outlines 6 principles of sustainable project management, focusing on commitment, accountability, ethical decision-making, integrated governance, and critically social and ecological equity.
I'm really intrigued by this idea of social and ecological equity. What does that mean in the context of project management?
Yeah, so it's about ensuring that projects benefit everyone, not just a select few. It means considering the impact of projects on marginalized communities, indigenous populations, and future generations. And it also means making sure that projects contribute to a healthy and thriving planet,
Right.
not just short-term economic gains.
So it's about thinking beyond the immediate project stakeholders and considering the broader impact on society and the environment.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a significant shift in perspective. But how do organizations actually put these principles into practice? Are there any specific tools or frameworks that help them integrate sustainability into their projects?
Yeah, absolutely. The guide introduces the GPMP5 standard, which is a really powerful tool that helps align projects with an organization's sustainability strategies. It focuses on the impact of projects on people, planet, and prosperity. So think of it as a roadmap for ensuring that projects contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future.
Okay, so it sounds like this standard provides a practical framework for translating those high-level principles into concrete actions.
Right.
But it's not just about the what of sustainability, is it? The guide also emphasizes the how, particularly when it comes to ethics and values in project management.
You're right on the mark. And that's actually where we'll pick up in part 2 of our deep dive. We'll explore the crucial role of ethics in project management, especially in the context of these complex global supply chains.
Okay, well, stay tuned for that. We're back for part 2 of our deep dive into regenerative sustainability and project management. And we've covered a lot of ground already, from the evolving definition of sustainability to the crucial role of projects in shaping a better future. But now I'm really interested in exploring the ethical dimension of all of this. The guide emphasizes the how of sustainability, particularly when it comes to decision-making and the complexities of global supply chains.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. We can have all the right frameworks and standards in place, but without a strong ethical foundation, our efforts towards sustainability can easily fall short.
Okay, I'm all ears. Why is ethics so central to sustainable project management, especially when we're talking about supply chains?
Well, think about the ripple effects of a project, The materials we use, the labor practices, we support the communities we impact. These choices have ethical implications that extend far beyond the immediate project site. A project's impact can be felt across continents and even across generations.
So it's about recognizing that our decisions have consequences, not just for the project itself, but for the wider world.
Right.
The guide mentions that a project's supply chain can be particularly vulnerable to ethical challenges. So what are some of the key risks that project managers should be aware of?
Well, one major concern is human rights violations. We need to be vigilant about ensuring that workers throughout the supply chain are treated fairly and that their rights are respected. This includes things like fair wages, safe working conditions, and freedom from forced labor.
Yeah, those are fundamental rights. That should be non-negotiable. But I can imagine that in a globalized economy, with complex supply chains spanning multiple countries, it can be really difficult to monitor and enforce these standards.
Absolutely. Transparency and traceability are crucial. We need to know where our materials are coming from, who is producing them, and under what conditions. The guide suggests using tools like blockchain technology to track materials and ensure ethical sourcing.
That's a really interesting application of technology to address ethical challenges. But it's not just about human rights, is it? The guide also talks about the importance of environmental responsibility throughout the supply chain.
You're absolutely right. We need to consider the environmental impact of our material choices, transportation methods, and manufacturing processes. This includes things like minimizing deforestation, reducing carbon emissions, and avoiding the use of hazardous chemicals.
It seems like there are a lot of factors to consider when trying to create an ethical and sustainable supply chain. The guide mentions the UN Global Compact's 10 principles as a valuable framework for guiding ethical decision-making. So what are some of the key takeaways from those principles?
Well, the 10 principles cover a wide range of issues, from human rights and labor standards to environmental protection and anti-corruption. They provide a universal set of guidelines that businesses can use to align their operations with ethical and sustainable practices.
10 principles. That's quite a list to keep track of. But it seems like having a clear framework like this could be incredibly helpful for project managers. who are navigating these complex ethical challenges.
Oh, right.
So how can project managers actually put these principles into practice? What are some practical steps they can take?
Well, the guide emphasizes the importance of asking the right questions. Project managers need to be curious and proactive in evaluating ethical risks throughout the supply chain.
Okay.
This means asking questions like, where are materials coming from? Are workers being treated fairly? What are the environmental impacts of our sourcing decisions?
Those are some tough questions,
Yeah.
but they're essential to ask if we're serious about creating a more sustainable and just world.
Yeah.
It sounds like this goes beyond simply complying with regulations. It's about like a deeper commitment to doing the right thing, even when it's difficult or costly.
Exactly. It's about embedding ethical considerations into every stage of the project lifecycle. And that's where the concept of the circular economy comes in.
Okay, we talked about the circular economy briefly in part 1, but I'm still a bit fuzzy on how it connects to all of this. Can you remind us what the circular economy is all about and how it relates to these ethical and regenerative practices?
Sure. So essentially, the circular economy is a systems-level approach to sustainability. It's about moving away from the traditional linear model of take, make, waste, and embracing a more circular model where resources are kept in use for as long as possible.
Okay,
This involves designing for durability, reusability, and recyclability.
so it's about closing the loop on resource consumption, minimizing waste, and creating a more regenerative system.
Right.
I see how that aligns with the principles of sustainability we've been discussing. But what's the ethical connection?
Well, the circular economy is inherently about resource stewardship,
Right.
which has ethical implications. When we design products for longevity and reuse, we're reducing the need to extract new resources, which often comes at a social and environmental cost.
Right, so by embracing circularity, we're not just reducing our environmental footprint, we're also potentially reducing the ethical risks associated with resource extraction and waste disposal.
Exactly.
But how does this actually play out in project management? How can project managers incorporate circular economy principles into their work?
Well, the key is to think about circularity throughout the entire project lifecycle. This starts with the design phase. We need to design buildings, infrastructure, and products with their end of life in mind.
So instead of just focusing on the initial construction or creation, we're also thinking about what happens at the end of a product's life.
Precisely. It requires a shift in mindset from a linear to a circular approach. It's about designing for disassembly, choosing materials that can be easily recycled, and thinking about how products can be remanufactured or upgraded, rather than simply discarded.
That's a pretty significant shift in thinking for a lot of project managers.
It is, but the guide emphasizes that this shift is essential. It's about moving from a take, make, waste approach to a reduce, reuse, recycle philosophy.
Yeah, I could see how that would be a game changer for sustainability. But what happens after the design phase? How do we ensure that these circular principles are carried through the rest of the project?
That's where sustainable sourcing and procurement come into play.
Procurement, the unsung hero of many projects. So how do we make sure we're procuring materials in a way that supports the circular economy?
Well, it's all about prioritizing recycled and renewable resources whenever possible. We need to move away from our reliance on virgin materials and embrace materials that have already been in use. This can involve working with suppliers who share our commitment to sustainability and exploring innovative sourcing strategies.
It sounds like this could be a real opportunity to collaborate with suppliers and create more sustainable supply chains.
Absolutely. And the guide emphasizes that communication and collaboration are key throughout the process.
Makes sense. We can't achieve circularity in a vacuum. It requires a shared understanding and commitment from everyone involved.
Exactly. And then there's process optimization. This is where we look at how we can make our project processes more resource efficient and minimize waste at every step.
So we're not just thinking about the materials we're using, we're also looking at how we're using them.
Precisely. This can involve things like implementing lean construction principles, reducing energy consumption during the construction phase, and finding ways to reuse or recycle materials on site. It's about finding creative ways to do more with less.
I love that. It's about efficiency and sustainability working hand in hand.
You got it. And let's not forget about risk and opportunity management. Circularity introduces a whole new set of considerations that project managers need to be aware of.
Okay, what kind of risks are we talking about here?
Well, for example, there could be risks associated with the availability or quality of recycled materials. Or there might be challenges in finding suppliers who can meet our circularity requirements.
So it's important to factor these risks into our planning and come up with mitigation strategies.
Absolutely. But it's not just about risks. There are also huge opportunities associated with circularity.
I'm all about opportunities. Tell me more.
Well, think about the potential cost savings we discussed earlier, or the competitive advantage that comes with being a leader in circularity. It's about seeing circularity not just as a challenge, but as a source of innovation and value creation.
It sounds like we need to shift our mindset from seeing circularity as a constraint to seeing it as a catalyst for positive change.
Exactly. And that brings us to our final point, resource monitoring. It's not enough to simply implement circular principles. We also need to track our progress and measure our impact.
The importance of data. I'm sensing a theme here. So how do we monitor resources in a way that supports circularity?
It's all about establishing clear metrics and indicators that align with our circularity goals. We need to track things like our use of virgin versus recycled materials, the amount of waste we're generating, and the lifespan of the products or infrastructure we're creating.
And this data can then be used to inform future decisions and continually improve our circularity performance.
You got it. It's about creating a feedback loop where we're constantly learning and refining our approach.
This is all incredibly insightful. So we've talked about how project management can embrace the circular economy. But how does this all tie back to our main theme of regenerative sustainability? Are they really two sides of the same coin?
They absolutely are. The circular economy is a powerful tool for achieving regenerative sustainability. When we keep resources in use for longer, reduce waste, and regenerate materials, we're directly contributing to the health of our planet and the well-being of our society. It's about creating a system where economic activity works in harmony with nature rather than against it.
Yeah, it's about moving beyond sustainability as a defensive strategy to seeing it as a driver of innovation and value creation.
Exactly, and that's what regenerative sustainability is all about.
This has been an incredible journey so far. We've explored the evolution of sustainability, the role of ethics in project management, the power of the circular economy, and the interconnectedness of it all. But we're not done yet. In part 3 of this deep dive, we'll explore how these concepts are playing out on the ground with real-world examples of projects and organizations that are leading the way in regenerative sustainability. Stay tuned for the inspiring stories and innovative solutions that are shaping a more sustainable future. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into regenerative sustainability. And in the first 2 parts, we really dug into like the theory and the concepts, but now I want to see how this stuff actually plays out in the real world, you know? What are some projects that are really walking the walk when it comes to regenerative sustainability?
Well, there are some truly inspiring projects happening all over the world that are pushing the boundaries of what's possible. These projects go beyond simply minimizing harm. They're actively regenerating ecosystems, strengthening communities, and creating a more sustainable future for all of us.
That's what I like to hear. So what's our first example?
Let's start with the Bullitt Center in Seattle, Washington. It's considered one of the greenest commercial buildings in the world. And it's a fantastic example of how regenerative design principles can be applied to urban environments.
Okay, I'm all ears. What makes the Bullitt Center so special?
Well, it was designed to be a living building, which means it's intended to operate as efficiently and sustainably as a natural ecosystem.
Interesting.
It generates all of its own energy through solar panels, collects and treats its own water, and even composts its waste on site.
Wow. So it's not just minimizing its impact, it's actually producing more resources than it consumes. That's a whole new level of sustainability.
Exactly. And it goes beyond just the technical aspects. The Bullitt Center also prioritizes the well-being of its occupants, with features like ample natural light, fresh air ventilation, and a connection to nature through rooftop gardens and green spaces.
It sounds like a pretty amazing place to work. So the Bullitt Center is a great example of regenerative design in action. What other innovative projects are out there?
Well, let's shift gears and talk about the Netherlands. They're doing some really innovative work with sustainable infrastructure, particularly in the realm of water management.
Yeah, the Netherlands is known for its expertise in water management, especially with their history of like reclaiming land from the sea. So how are they applying those skills to regenerative sustainability?
One fascinating example is the Room for the River program. Instead of trying to control rivers through traditional flood defenses, they're actually creating more space for rivers to naturally expand and contract, mimicking their natural behavior.
So it's about working with nature rather than trying to control it.
Precisely. They're creating floodplains, relocating dikes, and even lowering riverbeds to give rivers more room to meander. This not only reduces flood risk, but also creates new habitats for wildlife. improves water quality, and enhances the aesthetic appeal of the landscape.
I see. So it's not just about flood prevention. It's about creating a more resilient and vibrant ecosystem.
Exactly. And it's a great model for how we can rethink infrastructure projects to be more in harmony with nature. Another inspiring example from the Netherlands is the Park 2020 project in Amsterdam.
Okay, Park 2020. What's so special about that?
Well, it's a groundbreaking, sustainable business park that's designed according to circular economy principles. The buildings are constructed using reusable materials, energy is generated from renewable sources, and waste is minimized and recycled.
So it's like a mini circular economy within a larger urban environment.
You got it. And it goes beyond just the physical infrastructure. Park 2020 also fosters a collaborative and innovative environment, with businesses working together to share resources, reduce their environmental impact, and create new sustainable solutions.
That sounds like a fantastic model for creating more sustainable and regenerative business districts. Are there any other projects that are particularly inspiring to you?
Let's move on to a project that tackles both environmental and social challenges. The Great Green Wall Initiative in Africa. It's a truly ambitious undertaking.
I've heard about the Great Green Wall. It's a massive project, isn't it?
It is. It's a plan to create a band of restored land across the entire width of Africa just south of the Sahara Desert. The goal is to combat desertification, restore degraded land, and create a more resilient ecosystem.
It's hard to even imagine a project of that scale. But it sounds like it could have a huge impact.
Absolutely. Beyond the obvious environmental benefits like combating desertification and restoring biodiversity, it also has the potential to create jobs, improve food security, and empower local communities.
Wow, so it's really about restoring the land and the lives of the people who depend on it.
Exactly. And that's a hallmark of regenerative sustainability. It's about creating solutions that benefit both people and the planet.
It's been so inspiring to hear about these real-world examples. It really shows how regenerative sustainability isn't just a theory or a buzzword. It's a movement that's gaining traction and creating real change around the world.
I completely agree. And what's even more exciting is that this is really just the beginning. There are countless other projects happening at different scales, from individual initiatives to large-scale collaborations that are demonstrating the power of regenerative practices to create a better future.
It's so encouraging to see this shift in thinking, where sustainability is no longer seen as a burden or a constraint, but as an opportunity for innovation, creativity, and positive change. This has been such a fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the evolving definition of sustainability to the power of the circular economy to these inspiring stories of real-world projects. And I hope our listeners are feeling as energized as I am to start putting these ideas into practice in their own lives.
Absolutely. Whether it's making more conscious consumer choices, advocating for sustainable practices within your organization, or even just starting your own small regenerative project, we can all be part of the solution.
That's a great point. Every action we take, no matter how small, can contribute to a more sustainable and thriving future. So to our listeners, we challenge you to take what you've learned from this deep dive and turn it into action. Let's all be part of creating a world where regenerative sustainability is the norm, not the exception. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.